Hello and welcome to Gumbley Brothers' presentation of the board game Heaven and Ale. This is part one, and just to explain the game, how it works, and how to do well at it, and how to enjoy this wonderful game. I'm John Gumbley, and it's my pleasure to do this presentation. Heaven and Ale is a board game from Michael Kiesling and Schmidt. It was published in 2017. This is a wonderful game and is worth exploring and enjoying. It basically harks back to the medieval period when and Middle Ages period, when the monasteries were the hub of society. Indeed, as we read in the history, by the time of Henry VIII, the monasteries had 1/3 of the land in England. So while it might seem obscure to be talking about ale making in monasteries, given the historical background, the economies of the monasteries were very important, and making ale for the community very important. So let's talk a bit about the game and how it works, and in order to do that I've already set up a board over here. Let's go and have a look at the board. So here's what the board looks like. I'll just move my cup of tea. You need a cup of tea in order to get through this. So what does the board look like? Well, there's a main board and there are players boards. Here I've set up for 3-player, but you can play 2, 3 or 4-player games. So there's a board and there's a board over there as well. So let me take you through the board so you understand it a bit. If you've got the game, you can read all this in the rules, but basically we set out the board, the main board, much like this. These are the starting tokens of the players over here, and they go in the starting lineup. So there are 4 spots you can actually place your player. You randomly determine, the game says who's going to go first, and let's imagine it's black for the moment. Then the other 2 players can pick one of these circles to go on in the starting square. So if you go on this square, you get extra money. If you go on this square, you help your brewer, and if you go on this square, you help one of your resources. So we'll just put it here for the moment, one on money and one on resources. You'll understand that more as we go through the game. Now, for the purpose of setting up the game, we need those barrels. So these are barrels. There's a little one underneath, you can see, and a larger one over the top. Doesn't matter which order they go in, as long as they're all representative. There are 12 of them. We'll come back to them. In the center are the monk tiles, and there's 4 stacks here for a 3-player game. That represents 4 rounds around the board, and there's 2 more rounds here for the 4-player game, and you take away 1 stack for the 2-player game and just work with the 3 rounds. So these keep track of our rounds and also of the monks. In addition to that, we have these harvest or point squares, privilege point squares, here, here, and here, and right around the board there are 6 of them. In addition to that, we have the resource squares, which are here. There's no resources on them yet, so we'll come back to actually setting up the board more fully in a moment. So what is this game really about, Heaven and Ale? Well, it comes down to really our player board. So here's our player board, and you should hopefully, if you've got the game, you've got it in front of you. In the bottom corner, the players start with a brewer in the bottom left. There's silos for resources, which go on their colours, brown for wood, and then yeast, hops, and the blue one for water, and barley in yellow. In addition to that, the players get money measured in ducats, and there are these flat ducat 10s and 5s, and then there's the coins for singles. They also get these privilege cards. I'll come back to those here, and the privileges are on the reverse side. We'll talk about that a bit later. And they get their starting token, which I've already talked about on the main board. So, what are we trying to do? Well, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make the best and the most ale in our monastery. There's our wonderful little monastery, and here is our ale making up here. So if you look on your board, you'll see numbers through 1 to 20 is where we make our ale. And here, our fields are where we grow everything for our ale. So what's the aim of the game? The aim of the game is to get our silos, which are here, 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 and here, into this section so we can make ale. Unless all the silos get at least to mark 1 here in the top left corner, unless they all get there, you cannot make a single barrel of ale, and you'll get 0 points apart from the couple of bonuses you might get. But basically you lose the game. So we have to move our markers up from here, at least up to 1, and as far up the board as we can, making barrels of ale. In order to move them up, we have to fill our silos. How do we fill them? We fill them by growing things on this board here. How do we grow things on this board? We go around the main board and we pick up resources. And we can pick up these privilege purple tiles, and they allow us to actually activate or store the resources. Okay, the only other part of the equation that's very important to us is the monks, and they look like this. I'll just open up this pack. So this, at the beginning of the first round, you open up 1 stack of 4 and you put it in the 4 monk spots. They have little people symbols, you can see there, and the first one has a 4, and the second one a 3, and the third one a 2, and the fourth one 1. So they are randomly distributed, and the monks aren't any better because they have bigger numbers. They just cost more. I'll come back to that in a moment. Now this game is designed to be an interplay between collecting resources, banking those resources or activating them, and using your monks to multiply your options. So it's very important to have monks, it's very important to have resources. Along the way you can get those bonuses which are in barrels, but the main thing is to make sure you plant resources and harvest the resources and move these silos further up the board into this ale production circuit up here, 1 to 20. So there's a lot to learn, but let's start from the most basic. So the setup is almost finished here. I've handed out all the money to each of the players, so they've all got their money. But what I haven't done is I haven't put the resources out. So you can see over here all the ones with 1s on them. Right, there are some tiles with 2 on them. You don't use those at this point. Probably for the 4-player game they'll be more required. But we randomly put them out, and we put them over these squares here that have these little yellow resource symbols. So we randomly put them out and we turn them up the correct way. So that's 4 hops, 5 yeast, 3 yeast, 5 barley, 1 wood, 1 water, 3 water, 2 yeast, 4 wood. You can see that? Yep. 4 water, 3 wood, 4 water, 1 yeast, 5 barley, and 3 barley. So there should be 15 in all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now every part of the board now has tokens on it, except two little corner bits, which is here in brown, and they're the barrel squares, and they pertain to the barrels in the center. So when you want to claim a barrel, you go to one of those squares. But other than that, all of them now have something that you can harvest or use in your quest to make the best ale. So the person on point 1, to begin with, all resources will have to be bought. So money is important in this game, and managing your money is important. So as we said before, the person who goes first will get to go first, but the other two people get slight bonus to start the game. And you can claim these bonuses at the beginning of each round. So you can see the yellow token is on the resource square. So the yellow player, which happens to be me, can push up one resource 2 points. And so I'm going to push up the weakest of them down here, which is barley, up 2. Keep in mind, our whole idea is to keep filling these silos, and when we fill them, we push them up this and round. So I'm pushing my one that's emptiest up 2 squares. So that's a good start. The red one has put himself on extra money, so red will be claiming 2 extra ducats, which I'll pull from the reserve and put them in red's corner. Okay, so when we start, the black will start first. So this is my black board over here, and black will go first. Now, here's the thing, there's no dice thrown in this game. You just get to go wherever you like. But here's the trick, in each round, you go around the board, just round the board like this, clockwise. You don't have the opportunity to go backwards. So once you skip over a square, you can't go back to it this round. So for example, if black went up to here and decided he wanted barley, 5 of them, he could take that, but he's missed the opportunity of taking anything before this. Now we'll get another go at things next round, but those particular resources might be claimed by somebody else. So he'd have to take whatever comes next round. So you can go more slowly, but of course that might mean things that go further up might get taken by another player. If they're attractive to all players, then one player might claim them before another. So part of the trick and the clever mechanism of this game is to see how quickly you want to go around the board. Once you get right round the board, back to the starting square, you can pick which circle you want to go in for a bonus or into the first position, and then you have to wait for the other players to complete the round. So let's see what black might do. Let's imagine that black likes the idea of 4 hops. So the 4 is the fertility, and that's how it will pay off when he grows it, but it's also the price. So here's our 4 hops, and he needs to put it on his board, but he needs to pay for it. The thing is, he can't pay for it until he knows which side of the board he's going to use. So there are 2 sides of the board, as you can see. There is a white side or a sunny side, and there is a dark side or a shady side. The sun and the shade have different capacities, and they also have different cost. So if he puts it in the shade, for example, on a these are called shed hexes, on a non-shed one, he can place it there and it will be it'll cost him 4 ducats, and every time that gets activated, it will give him 4 ducats. So he can only sell that on. It's inferior product he sells on to somebody else and gets ducats. But if he puts it here on a light sunny hex, then it actually produces hops for his ale, and that's very good for him. However, it costs him double. So double 4 is 8, and it will cost him 8. Let's imagine that black puts the 4 there, and he pays 8. So he puts the 10 into the reserve or the bank, and he takes out the 2 change. So that leaves him just with 2, 4, 6, 17. And he's got his first hops crop growing in the fields. It's now the second person's turn, and now it just goes clockwise. So from black, we go now to the yellow turn, which was originally my board. And this now is my go, and I take the yellow and I can place it wherever I like. Now I need all crops. So all crops are valuable to me, but I have to manage my money as well. So I can, for example, go to 5 there if I want to and get 5 to start with, or I could go 3 and play a bit more modestly and keep my money in check for a bit longer. In this case, I think I'll just go for the 3, and I will place it. So this is another example of buying crops. I'll place it down here, and that will cost me 6 because it's in the sunny side. So I pick up, oops, that's not my money. I'll pick up the 6 from here. I only have 5 there, so I'll pay 10 and get 4 in return. And I've now paid for my crop there. So that's a good start. Right, so now it just goes clockwise for this round, and red's next on the board. So red has a go, and obviously I'm playing for other players just as a demonstration. But if he went there, he could play a 5, take that crop, and let's say he sows it instead in the dark section, so it won't produce yeast for him, but it will produce money, and it only costs him 5. So he has 5 here, and he puts it there in the reserve, leaving him with 20. So everyone starts with 25, and those are our first purchases. Now we keep going clockwise. Now let's explain some squares now. There are 2 types of squares you need to be aware of. The first of these is the monk square. So see this here, we put these down earlier. That's the first monk square. The picture of the monk is random, but the cost of the monk here is 4. Again, I have to place it on my board in a field, and if I put it in the shady side, it costs 4. If I put it in a sunny position, it costs 8. The next monk here has a 3. Now the monk here is exactly the same benefit to anybody, but it's cheaper. So you can ask yourself, why would I pick one here for 4 when I can have one here for 3? Well, most people would say the same thing. The problem is, once you go around here for a monk that's worth 2, and another one right at the end worth 1, that's fine, but if someone gets there before you, you've run out of space before you lose the round altogether to pick up another monk. So you have to make a decision about how much you're prepared to pay for a monk, 4, 3, 2 or 1, and whether it's worth getting one earlier or waiting and hoping you can get one a bit later, or skipping ahead to get something. Technically, if I'm the black, when it's black's go, black could say, I want to get a monk and I want to get it for 1. So I'm going to go right round there. But that means black would have to basically circuit the entire board and come round here, and he would then buy that for 1, and now he's only got 2 options left of things to do because he cannot go backwards in this round. So there are a lot of decisions to make about how quickly you move around the board. So that's the monk square. How do monks work? Well, let's give you an example. Say black decided to buy that monk for 4. Well, let's say actually that he went straight forward and got this 3 instead, just a little bit cheaper, and he picked up the monk on that square. So I've just picked that up, and he puts it on his board. He puts it in the sunny side, so it costs him 6. So he's got 6, and he'll pay 6, leaving him only 11. That goes in the bank, or the reserve as they call it. And he then says, I need to put this here. This is where I've chosen. And a little bit later, he picks up another resource for 4, a wood, and puts it for 4 there. As time goes on, this monk gets activated, and I'll show you how that gets done in a moment. But when the monk gets activated, every connected hex tile, like these 4, every one that surrounds him, not including the sheds, but every other square or hex that connects to him, gets activated the moment he is triggered. All of these get activated. So if he were to have all of these around him, then you would collect 4 water, 4 hops, 4 wood, and 3 wood. So that's how it can be helpful to you. That's how monks work. If the monk is here, and there is a second monk, and this one gets activated or triggered, it activates this monk, and you get your brewer to go up 1. And this means that your brewer is making better ale, better quality ale. And the higher that brewer goes up, the more points you get at the end of the game. And that's represented by these times 2. See that times 2 in there? And the times 3, that's the final points times by it, because it's a higher quality ale. So the higher we can get our brewer up, the more points we get at the end. So that gives you an idea of how the monks work. Let me just put those back for a moment. And I want to talk to you about the sheds. So you can see on your board, this is Black's board, that if Black eventually has 6 tiles around his entire shed area, this one here, then that is a built shed, and it triggers, it can trigger various things, various crops. So basically, we go to this chart here in your corner, and we add up the number of points there are around here. So you will have purchased all of these, so it might take a little while, but 4, 4, and 4 are 12, and 2 is 14, and 3 and 3 are 20. So we go to the chart, and 18 to 25 is called a 3 shed. You'll see that little symbol. Can you see that? Yep. It also has a 1 on the brewer, if you see that as well. So that means we pick up from this pile a shed that has a 3 on it. And it basically has 3 white little triangles. And wherever you point those triangles, those are activated. So in this case, I'm going to point them in this direction, so I can activate there, hops, there, wood, and there, water, which will be ducats because it's in the shady part. So that would allow me to get 4 hops, which moves my silo up. I'm filling up my silo of hops, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4 wood. So it would move my wood along, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 5. And it would also give me 3 ducats. So I'd pick 3 ducats out of the treasury and add them to my list. That's all because I managed to get a full shed in there, and I was able to harvest those crops. I also get, as I said a moment ago, 1 step from my brewer, my master brewer, so he goes up 1. And the further I can get him, I need to get him up, if I can, to that 1 at least, to give myself a superior ale. So at the moment, that's the first of a number of parts to begin to explain how heaven and ale works. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I hope you'll also join us for part 2.